I want to think a little bit more about this relationship between thinking and feeling, and particularly as it relates to the more calculating end of that spectrum. You know, as I said in previous videos, and I'm just kind of speculating here really, there's a kind of spectrum of cognitive activity possibly, which, you know, rather than having thinking at one end and feeling at the other end, it has something like embodied sensory response at one end, you know, the purely kind of sensory motor stuff that's going on, and something like calculating or signifying at the other, the very kind of rarefied and abstract activities, apparently disembodied activities. Baby, come on! With these two terms, thinking and feeling, actually being completely intertwined in the middle. Go on. Sorry about that. But in a comment exchange I had with Dana Garrett, hello there Dana, we were discussing the certain kind of statements which do seem to be very, very of the calculating end. And the example you gave, Dana, was A equals A. You know, I can think of A equals A in my head, or put it into a kind of mathematical form, 2 equals 2, or expanded mathematical form, 1 plus 1 equals 2, and I can think that in my head. And it's purely propositional in form, it seems. It's very abstract, very mathematical, you know, it's not of the body. And I guess in practice can be instantiated in silicon or in rocks on the ground or in abacus. You know, you can put that truth in many different forms, that propositional statement in many different forms, as well as having it as a pattern of neuronal firings. But I think there is a difference. I think this is a kind of an illustration, I think, of what I'm saying about the necessary intertwining of thinking and feeling. Because when I've got this feeling, this thought in my head, 1 plus 1 equals 2, or when I see it written on a piece of paper, it isn't just a kind of sterile calculation. It is accompanied by a feeling, and that feeling is something like rightness. You know, I can sense the rightness of it. I mean, I guess there must have been a time when I couldn't, you know, before I learned maths. But absolutely feels right to me, in a way that 1 plus 1 equals 3 just feels wrong. And it's a subtle feeling, but it's definitely there. And I'm sure it comes out of embodiment, because equations are particularly obvious, I think, embodied instances of mathematics. You know, the equal sign in the middle of an equation is very like the fulcrum on a balance, isn't it, you know? When you talk about balancing equations, you put enough on one side of the fulcrum, the equal sign, to perfectly balance what's on the other side of the equal sign fulcrum. So, you know, and that's something we do all the time. You know, you do it all the time. We walk, we make sure the weight on one half of our body is equal to the weight on the other half, you know. We're constantly engaging in that kind of embodied practice of putting things on one end of a fulcrum that perfectly match the things on the other end and balancing them out. And I think that's what's going on when we do equations. And from that experience, it derives a set of, as I say, a completely felt sense of the truth proposition of that statement. 1 plus 1 equals 2 feels right, because I have the experience of having 1 plus 1 heavy object in one hand and 2 heavy objects in the other hand. You know, I can feel it. It goes deep, doesn't it? So I think that distinguishes it from those kind of statements which you would instantiate in silicon, because at the moment at least, until effective computing is fully up and running, there isn't an equivalent to that accompaniment. And I think it's good evidence, I think, to suggest that's what drives a lot of mathematics. I mean, listening to mathematicians talking about their work, and scientists who use a lot of maths, I think I'm thinking of people like Murray Gell-Mann here, who talks about it really well. A lot of the impetus and the experience of doing maths is driven by exactly that kind of a sense. You know, you make complex equations way beyond the little fulcrum playground balancing act that we do, that those of us who don't know much about maths do. Really complex playgrounds of equations. But they do get a sense, they say, of the rightness or the elegance or the beauty even of these equations, which steer them towards working on particular parts of them, or steer them towards identifying problems. They can feel the imbalance, they can feel versions of that kind of embodiment going on within it, which again is as far as we know, is unique to the kinds of processing and calculation that certain kinds of neuronal assemblies do, and which doesn't happen anywhere else. So I suppose I'm just saying there that thinking and feeling thing, it's intertwined, even at its most abstract end of it. I suppose just citing sources, I suppose I'm coming from here, but primarily from a book called Where Mathematics Came From, which is George Lakoff and Rafael Nunez. And Rafael Nunez himself has done a lot of independent work on the feeling of mathematics, which I know sounds weird, but it's it seems to be the case, that we're not sterile calculating machines. We are, even the most abstract engagement with number is shot through with feelings of rightness, valuing of certain principles like balance, apparent valuing of things like symmetry and elegance and beauty and aesthetics and all those things that have driven our evolutionary development, really.